Muy buenos días a todos. A nombre de Ping Random House les doy la bienvenida a esta rueda de prensa. Mi nombre es Miguel Moncada y tengo la fortuna de ser el editor en español de Optimal, el nuevo libro de Daniel Goleman que hoy nos reúne aquí. Como ya es bien sabido, Daniel Goleman es un psicólogo, periodista y autor conocido principalmente por su pionero trabajo en el campo de la inteligencia emocional. Su libro más influyente, La inteligencia emocional, publicado en 1995, popularizó el término y ayudó a darle relevancia en campos como la psicología, la educación y el liderazgo empresarial, entre otros. Desde entonces, el trabajo de nuestro querido autor aquí presente ha explorado la manera en que las habilidades emocionales, como la autoconciencia, la empatía y la atención, entre otras aptitudes, pueden ser tan importantes como la inteligencia cognitiva para tener una vida plena y llena de significado. Aparte de la inteligencia emocional, Daniel ha escrito numerosos libros sobre temas relacionados, perdón, con el comportamiento humano, el mindfulness, la psicología y el liderazgo. Además de su trabajo como autor, ha sido columnista científico del New York Times. La obra de Daniel ha tenido un impacto significativo en diversos campos, desde la educación hasta la gestión empresarial, promoviendo una mayor conciencia y comprensión de la importancia y profesional. Y es precisamente en este contexto en el que su nuevo libro, Optimal, coescrito con el psicólogo Cary Chernis, se enmarca. Este libro que ven aquí, que es una maravilla, mero. En cómo este libro se enmarca en cómo aplicar la inteligencia emocional y sus distintas herramientas en el campo laboral y organizacional con el fin de ayudar a los individuos a navegar las complejidades de las interacciones humanas en el trabajo y al mismo tiempo alcanzar su máximo potencial profesional, pero evitando también el tan temido burnout que tanto asola a nuestras sociedades. Y pues bienvenido, Daniel, y muchísimas gracias
Thank
por
you.
darnos la oportunidad de conversar contigo acerca de este tema. Este, pues tengo una serie de preguntas que le voy a hacer a nuestro querido autor, aprovechando, la verdad, esta gran oportunidad, ¿no? Y bueno, Daniel, mi primera pregunta es, ¿qué lugar ocupa Optimal en tu trayectoria como autor? Este libro, ¿qué lugar ocupa dentro del marco de toda tu obra?
The optimal state for doing anything, including work, emerged from research at Harvard Business School. And it's a state where you perform at your best, you're very satisfied with how you're doing, you're engaged, you feel good, you feel highly connected, you're very focused on what you're doing. And I've found over the course of my career that this has always been, for example, as a writer, as a journalist, this has been the state from which I could most easily do what I had to do. So I have an assignment, say, to write a 650 word article by 3 p.m. This is the state that helps me do it. If I'm distracted, if I'm upset, if I'm not calm and clear, if I'm not in an optimal state, it's harder to do. And it's harder to do anything. The way the brain is designed, the more emotionally upset you are, the less ability you have, actually, the less width of attention, the smaller your aperture of focus. So focus and emotional upset are what we call reciprocal inhibited. That is, if one is great, if your focus is good, your emotions are calm. If your emotions are upset, you have very little focus, no matter what you're doing. So over the course of my career, Miguel, I found that writing, which is what I mostly do, comes easiest if I'm in that optimal state.
Ah, qué interesante la relación que planteas, que encontraste entre estar concentrado y estar calmado, ¿no? Muy interesante. Y y yo quería preguntar, bueno, leyendo tu libro, haces una analogía que se me hace muy, bueno, mencionas que es un estado, este estado óptimo Es un estado parecido al que los grandes deportistas de alto rendimiento experimentan cuando están en un
Mm.
estado de máxima concentración. ¿Cómo descubriste esto? Bueno, me intriga saber cómo descubriste esto,
Yeah.
a qué investigaciones accediste. Vaya, es muy interesante, ¿no?
Well, actually, I've been involved in attention training methods for years. People call it meditation, but if you take the belief system away, whether it's a Christian belief system or Buddhist or Hindu, doesn't matter. All meditations essentially are attention training methods. And a few years ago, I wrote a book called Focus, which looked at the fact that we're so highly distracted these days. There's social media, there's what's on our phone. We get more emails than ever. It's very different than back in the day when mail was before email, when you got
Ujú.
letters. Life was slower then, but now it's highly stressful and full of distractions, which means I see this as meaning it's more important than ever to take control of our own attention. Because when we do that, Miguel, we both are able to focus and immerse ourselves in what's important right now. And also because of the way the brain is arranged, we get calmer. So we become calm and clear, which from my point of view is the best state to get work done well in.
¿Ok? Eso me lleva a una pregunta que tenía preparada por aquí, que dice, ¿qué lugar
Mm-hmm.
ocupa la práctica del mindfulness dentro de la inteligencia emocional y cómo podemos llevar esto de una forma práctica a nuestro campo laboral, a nuestro día a día, cuando estamos en la oficina y a veces, bueno, muchas veces
Well,
tenemos que ser
go,
capaces de
yes. Can I
reaccionar?
answer?
Sí, 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 por favor.
Yes, of course. So the analogy that I like is that training your attention is doing the same for your brain for mental fitness as working out and exercising, for example, lifting weights is for physical fitness. Every time you lift a weight, every repetition makes that muscle that much stronger. And with mindfulness, what you're doing is when you notice you're distracted, you bring your mind back to the point of focus. That is the essence of every kind of attention training, every kind of meditation, every kind of mindfulness. So the moment of mindfulness, seeing you're distracted and bringing your mind back to focus, strengthens the circuitry for focus and attention. And just as you wouldn't lift weights at work, but you use your physical fitness as stamina and to get energy to do your work, it's the same with mental fitness. You might practice in the morning, say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you can fit in your schedule. But the payoff is later in the day when you have to react to the world. You're less emotionally reactive. You get upset less often. If you do get upset, it's less intense and you recover more quickly. This is really important. The definition of resilience is the time it takes you to recover from the peak of being upset to back to calm and clear. And all of those things benefit from this simple attention training I mentioned.
¿Ok? Pues muchas gracias. Me encanta esto del mental fitness, hay que ejecutarlo definitivamente.
Yes.
Este, Mira, tengo otra pregunta aquí relacionada con algo que dijiste anteriormente y que recibimos un montón de correos, estamos como sobreestimulados todo el tiempo, ¿no? Y esto creo que está relacionado directamente con el burnout, ¿no? ¿En qué crees tú que consiste que nuestras sociedades actuales estén tan agotadas y cómo nos puede ayudar aplicar la inteligencia emocional a evitar o a reducir el fenómeno del burnout, ¿no? Que todos estamos sufriendo actualmente?
Yes. So exactly. So I think burnout or stress, which is the pathway to burnout, is greater than ever today because of the rate and the velocity of things we have to handle. I don't care what you do, if you're a manager or salesperson or a journalist, doesn't matter. We have to deal with more coming in to us than ever before. And the rate at which is coming in and the rate at which we're pressured to deliver creates stress. And the body is designed to marshal what we call the fight or flight response, to handle moments of stress. But if we only have stress day after day, hour after hour, and never recover, then you're on the road to emotional exhaustion, which is just before burnout. I quit. I can't take it anymore. So the question is, how can we handle a stressful life and not get burnout? And a simple answer is this. Remember, the design of the body is to rise up to the emergency. But when you do that, it steals energy from your immune system, the cardiovascular system. It's an ancient design and it worked temporarily, but then the body is designed to have what's called a recovery phase. Technically, it's parasympathetic arousal. And getting in the recovery phase means that you give your body a chance to restore itself. And I think it's important today to schedule recovery. It's so easy to overlook it. It looks like a waste of time. It's not a waste of time. You're preparing yourself for the next battle, so to speak, the next stress. So recovery is very simple. It might look like spending time just hanging out with people you love, playing with a kid or a pet, going for a walk in nature, meditation or yoga, whatever works for you. It's important to put that in your daily schedule. It's not a waste of time at all. It's very, very important. So I know that we're scheduled from morning to night, but find a time, make it a priority. You're doing yourself a favor.
Sí, tenemos que hacer eso de agendar los descansos en nuestros días.
Yes.
Y bueno, regresando a la inteligencia, a la aplicación de la inteligencia emocional en el mundo laboral, fíjate que uno de los grandes problemas
Right.
que yo he detectado consiste en que demasiadas veces no existe una buena comunicación y esto genera todo tipo de conflictos, ¿no? Malos entendidos y por supuesto también nos puede
Yeah.
llevar a una baja productividad.
Yes.
¿Cómo puede ayudarnos la inteligencia emocional a solucionar esto,
Yes.
a la falta de comunicación en el ambiente laboral?
Miguel, allow me to go back and define emotional intelligence the way I see
Ujú,
it. There are four parts. The first is
perfecto.
self-awareness. And when I talked about refining attention, that's applied self-awareness. The second part of it is managing emotions. And when I talked about how to handle stress, that has to do with how we manage emotions. Uh, you're now saying there can be miscommunication. That has to do with the third and the fourth parts of emotional intelligence. The third part is empathy, being aware of other people, of our surround, our organization. And the fourth part is putting that all together to have effective relationships. So it's important to understand there are three kinds of empathy. The first is cognitive empathy. I understand how you think, the language you use to explain the world to yourself. This means I can communicate with you effectively because I know what language, what terms will make sense to you. The second is different. It calls on a very different part of the brain. It's emotional empathy. I know how you feel. I actually feel it too, because there's an invisible brain to brain bridge by which we transmit emotions between people. And the third part is empathic concern. I not only know how you think and how you feel, I care about you. That's very important. That's kind of empathy. The other two kinds of empathy can be used to manipulate people, and or maybe the basis of a miscommunication. But the third kind means you're there for the person. This builds trust, it builds closeness, it builds rapport. And I think that that connection, that strong rapport between people is essential at moments when we have disagreements, when we have misunderstandings, because it means we can stay together and work it out and understand the miscommunication and still have a strong relationship. It's not going to put our very relationship at danger.
Ok, sí. Pues sí, mediante la empatía, podemos ser capaces de tener una mucho mejor comunicación con nosotros y eso en el ambiente laboral y organizacional, pues solucionar muchísimos problemas, ¿verdad? Este, Te quería preguntar, ¿cuál sería la diferencia entre un equipo de trabajo cuyos miembros posean inteligencia emocional frente a uno en el que sus miembros no hayan desarrollado sus capacidades emocionales?
The answer is very simple. It has to do with how well that team performs. And I'm drawing on research by Vanessa Druskat, who's looked at high performing teams for decades now and studied them very closely. She finds that the best performance on a team comes when the team itself has what you might call a group level emotional intelligence. So there's a
¿Ok?
group self awareness. It means we know what each member of our team is good at, what they're not so good at. We're candid with each other. We trust each other. We welcome each other. We feel we belong. We manage our emotions amongst us. We have ways for working this out. And we recognize what's going on and we deal with it. We don't just let it throw us off. We're empathic, not just among the team, but to other parts of the organization that we may depend on as a team, for example. There may be other units that our success depends on or whose success depends on us. These are important team relationships. And then there may be some group in another organization, for example, that we're selling to or in our supply chain. It's important that we maintain good relationships with them as a team. As I said, this is emotional intelligence at the group level. And then putting that all together to maintain effective relationships with other teams, with other groups, with other parts of the organization. So all of that makes a team high performing. And teams that lack these abilities, sadly, uh, really don't do that well. I've designed or co-designed a way to help teams analyze their behavior and get better. It's called Team EI. If you're interested, it's at the Goleman Consulting Group. By the way, if you want to improve emotional intelligence, we have the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence Program. It's online. It's now in Spanish, by the way. And the
Ok,
first group will
genial,
start this fall. So anyone can sign up if they want the Spanish program.
¿no? Pues hay que inscribirnos todos a ese programa. Y en cuanto a los líderes, sí, sí, definitivamente.
That
Y
would
en
make
cuanto a los líderes, este, ¿por qué es importante para un líder tener inteligencia emocional? Y aquí pienso en específico, sobre todo en cómo puede esto influir en la toma de decisiones, ¿no?
well. Let me answer the question more broadly first and get to
Ok,
decision making. I've gone around the world, including, by the way, in Mexico, asking groups, business groups, tell me about a boss you've had or know about who you loved and a boss you've hated. And
mm,
what made that boss so good or so bad? And essentially, wherever I go, the portrait is the same. It's the good boss is emotionally intelligent. That's what our research has found. When I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence in 95, it was a new concept. I didn't have direct evidence. It was indirect and converging data that made my argument. Today, in writing Optimal, I'm able to harvest actually decades of research on emotional intelligence and leadership. And what it shows very clearly is that the very best leaders, the ones who get the best results from the people they lead, are emotionally intelligent. For example, there was a study of 65,000 entrepreneurs. These are people who are doing startups, very difficult to do. But to be highly successful, it turns out your emotional intelligence is twice as important as your IQ.
mm,
And the relationship between IQ and emotional intelligence is quite important for decision making. It's this, through your school years, IQ, your mental abilities, cognitive strengths are very important. They determine what profession you can go into, whether you can get an MBA or become a high-level executive or a doctor or lawyer. That's why IQ predicts lifetime earnings. However, this is really important. Once
Ok.
you're in that position, like I've talked at Google, and which has, only employs people in the top 1% of IQ. Once you're in an organization like that, everybody else is about as smart as you are
Ujú.
cognitively. It's your emotional intelligence, how you handle yourself, how you handle relationships, how you empathize, that is going to make you an outstanding leader. And in decision making, the brain is designed so that the more emotionally upset you are, the smaller the range of information you can take in. I was just talking to a group of investors, for example. They have to analyze companies and predict from that which will earn more and which will not. And to do that, they have to be very calm and clear and focused on the data and take in information fully so they can analyze it deeply and respond most creatively. That is the sign of good decision making, good information processing. So basically, your emotional state is not irrelevant to decision making. In fact, you want to manage your emotions well. And this is the second part rather, of the emotional intelligence model is emotional self-management, which means in part minimizing your high anxiety or anger, not letting it interfere with what you have to do right now. But it also means marshaling your positive emotions, seeing the upside of things, as well as keeping your eye on the goal despite the distractions of the day. But in that state of mind, you can take in information at your best and understand it fully and then make the best decision.
Wow, hace toda la diferencia entonces. Este, mira, nos están preguntando, Carolina Abarca pregunta, si podrás ayudarnos con consejos acerca de cómo gestionar o qué hacer cuando desde la postura de un empleado tenemos un líder o un jefe que no tiene inteligencia emocional. ¿Qué podemos hacer nosotros desde esa perspectiva?
This is a all too common question that I get asked, which suggests to me that there are all too many bosses who could use some improvement in emotional intelligence. I think one thing not to do is to tell your boss frankly and openly you're an idiot with emotional intelligence.
De acuerdo, de acuerdo.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Uh, the first thing I would recommend is to manage your own emotional reaction to that bad boss. In other words, you have to perform at your best despite the fact that you have a boss that you don't like, who seems to be maybe have no empathy, who doesn't think twice about blowing up at people, getting angry at people and yelling at them, whatever. So I would recommend that you can't get rid of that boss, or you can't change the situation externally, but you can manage it internally. I'm thinking of a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote it about his 4 years in Nazi concentration camps. And he said, I couldn't control the circumstances of my life. I could manage my inner reaction. He gave a definition of maturity, which I think is very insightful. He said, maturity is widening the gap between your emotional impulse and your actual action. That's a sign that you have what we call now in psychology cognitive control. Your brain's ability to handle upsetting emotions has improved. So I would say that this is step number one. I remember when I had a boss I didn't like who actually wanted to fire me at the New York Times. I had to go in every day. And despite the fact that I knew this guy really didn't like me or my work, I had to perform at my best. So I spent an hour every day meditating, actually, doing mindfulness so that I would be calm and clear throughout the day. And it helped me. And then When he got a promotion and was promoted out of his position, everybody applauded. He didn't realize that they weren't necessarily happy for him. They were happy to get rid of him, but they didn't know. He didn't know. But one of the other things that I sometimes say jokingly is you can get your boss's resume and send it out to executive headhunters. Maybe he'll get a job somewhere else. You export the problem. Or maybe you can find an ally in the organization who you feel safe to talk to, who can then talk to your boss. In other words, intervene indirectly. And when you say he's low in emotional intelligence, I have to ask, in what way is he or she low in emotional intelligence?
Okay.
Emotional intelligence is a range of abilities. So I said there are 4 domains: self-awareness, self-management, empathy, social skill. Within those domains, there are specific competencies or abilities that we see in outstanding performers, outstanding leaders, for example, that you don't see in others. And they nest within each of those domains. So is it that this boss lacks empathy or is unconcerned, doesn't care about people? That variety of empathy. Is it this boss can't manage upsetting emotions and yells at people? Their bosses can be low in emotional intelligence in different ways, just as any of us can. There's a very state-of-the-art leadership development which deploys what's called the 360, where people, you yourself say, I'm going through this process and I'd like you to evaluate me anonymously. So you pick maybe 8 people who
Okay.
you trust, who you value. They rate you anonymously on behavioral indicators of the varieties of emotional intelligence, and you get a profile of your strengths and weaknesses. It's like when you go to a doctor for a physical, they measure your lipids and your good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. You get 15 different data points and you get a profile of where you're healthy and where you could improve. Same with emotional intelligence. So when you say low in emotional intelligence, you want to know, or the person who cares about getting better wants to know, in what way could I get better? Where do I need to grow? Long answer, short question, sorry.
Son las mejores respuestas, las largas. Pero también yo agregaría que deberíamos de mandar a esos jefes a que tomen tu curso, definitivamente, ¿no? Definitivamente. Y tenemos aquí otra pregunta.
So
Sí, tenemos que mandarlos a que se inscriban ahí al curso, ahora que ya está en español también, que aprovechen nuestros jefes. Am, Aquí tengo una pregunta de Susana Pérez. Dice, actualmente vivimos en inmediatez y productividad excesiva. Y pues ahorita estamos conviviendo, hay trabajos que siguen en remoto y les ha funcionado, mientras que otros empleos, si no te ven en la oficina, te exigen, te exigen todavía ser más productivo, ¿no? O sea, como que esta situación del home office en algunos casos ha llevado a pues a exigirle más a los trabajadores. ¿Qué podemos hacer? ¿Cómo influye una buena gestión de la inteligencia emocional en estos casos? ¿Qué podemos hacer en estos casos que a lo mejor estamos en home office y tenemos que trabajar mucho más para pues salir adelante, ¿no?
one of the things I turn to is from a theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr. He has what's called in English the Serenity Prayer, something like, grant me the wisdom to tell what I can change about my situation and what I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So if your business place would be responsive to your saying, you're asking too much of us, we need to find a way to lessen the workload in order for us to perform better. Good luck. That's wonderful if your workplace, your business organization will listen to you. Many these days won't, and they won't because of the ratcheting upward of competition in so many business sectors. So businesses generally, or executives, feel that they need to get more out of the same workforce than ever. which gets me back to managing your own reaction and being sure that you give yourself a chance to rest and recover despite the stress and the increased stress at work. And the other advice I give is to find ways to get into that optimal state. One of the pathways that I think is often ignored is that you can get there if you can bring your attention to what you have to do right now. Working at home makes it more difficult sometimes because your distractions are there. You know, there's the laundry in the next room. The kids are home from school. It's not like the office. It's because you have your life there too. And that's a plus, but it can also be a minus. So being able to pay full attention to what you have to get done right now is always going to help you. It's a doorway into that optimal state.
Ok, perfecto. Tenemos otra pregunta que también está relacionada con el trabajo remoto,
Sure.
de Lorena Mora, y dice que, bueno, muchos de nosotros somos, pues seguimos en trabajo remoto, y cómo podemos ser emocionalmente inteligentes con las personas que no vemos, ¿no? Que no nos encontramos en persona. O sea, cómo aplicar la inteligencia emocional al trabajo remoto, ¿no?
Sure. This too is a question I'm often asked. I remember yesterday actually I was talking to a woman who's a manager who's working remotely with a remote team. And she said, it's just not the same. I value being able to work remotely, but you know, when you're at work every day with people, you naturally have side conversations. You might have lunch with them. You might go out for a drink after work, whatever, but you have a chance to know them as a person. And in remote work, that's lost. And I think there's real value
Ujú,
to it that you need to make up and you need to be more intentional about it by, for example, what I told this manager was, you know, it would help if you had a phone call, for example, with individuals about them. What do you want from life, from your career? Not about the job, not a you know, a business only call, but a call between two people because you want to strengthen the bonds of your relationship. That's going to help things go more smoothly. And, you know, there's a real problem built into, for example, Zoom meetings. And the problem is this: when we're face to face, our eyes meet. But when you're on Zoom, you either look at the camera, as I'm doing now, or you look at the face of the person you're talking to see how they're reacting. You can't do them both at the same time. And
ujú.
that means there's a little bit lost in terms of intimacy or rapport or connection, social, you know, the relationship. That's why I think in a remote situation, you have to make extra effort to replace to some extent what you would have if you were hanging out with that person day in, day out, 5 days a week.
Sí, esto del trabajo remoto está modificando las cosas, tiene sus, sus cosas, sus situaciones buenas, pero también se está perdiendo mucho esta conexión, es verdad. Nos pregunta Patricia Correa que si se puede lograr la excelencia en un equipo de trabajo y cómo lograrlo. Aunque en parte ya contestaste esta pregunta con, hablando de estos trabajos
Sure. But
en
let me
los
go
que
into
sí había
what
inteligencia emocional.
this team
Ujú,
EI process that Goleman Consulting Group helps teams with. It boosts the ability of a team to perform at its best, and it starts by having the team assess itself. That's team level self-awareness. How are we together? What are our problems? What would fix them? And then having the team decide how to interact together. These are called norms, setting norms. So, for example,
normas.
at IDEO, which is a creativity consultancy at one branch, they have a norm that you listen to people, you don't interrupt them, you don't take over a conversation. That's a common cold of bad listening, by the way. So if you are there and you forget and you interrupt someone, people remind you of the norm of listening by pelting you with small toy stuffed animals. It's kind of a fun way of reinforcing a norm. But basically, the teams themselves look, and we have a procedure for doing this, look at the different areas of team functioning and how well they're doing or not. And then they decide how they're going to fix it. What norms are we going to put in place that would improve our situation? And this learning can be very quick on a team. But that's basically the two steps: analyze, understand what the problem is, and come up with a way to fix it, a way of behaving together that would eliminate the problem.
Bien, muchas gracias por esa respuesta. Nos pregunta Lorena Mora, dice que la mayoría que muchas personas son ahorita padres de chicos que pertenecen a la generación Z y cómo interesar a estos jóvenes en la inteligencia emocional, cómo hacer que incorporen la inteligencia emocional en sus vidas.
Well, I have several answers. One is send them to a school that has a curriculum that includes this. It's called social emotional learning. There are many schools in Mexico that do this now. I don't know how to find them, but ask for social emotional learning. There are 100 or more different programs, many of which are in Spanish. So that's one way, because it teaches kids from age 5 till they go to university the basics of emotional intelligence. It's called one way you can find a good program is by going to the Collaborative for Academic Social and Emotional Learning, CASEL.org. That's one way to find the recommendations. It gives you best practices. The best programs will include the full spectrum of emotional intelligence and do it in an age-appropriate way. And it takes only 10 minutes or 20 minutes a week to do this for kids. But kids actually love this because it teaches them things like how to get along better with my friends, things kids really want to know. And the programs also teach teachers how to model this, include parents. They cover the whole spectrum. But to see the whole list of best practices, CASEL.org. However, there's another thing. The first teachers, the first tutors, the first mentors of emotional intelligence in a child's life are parents. Mm-hmm. Model it, embody it, reinforce it, mention it. Tell kids this is really important for what matters to them. And for a kid, it's not career, it's friends. This is going to help you get along better with friends. This is going to help you be a more popular kid. That's the motivator. And by the way, in any learning of emotional intelligence, you first want to know what matters to this person, what's motivating them. And it's true with your kids.
Okay, sí. Pues muchas gracias. Buscar escuelas y los mismos padres, dedicarnos a adquirir esa inteligencia emocional para transmitirla a nuestros pequeños. Pues ahora sí ya tenemos muchas preguntas, ¿eh? Otra pregunta de Flor,
Okay.
que dice que actualmente, es una pregunta, ¿no? Que dice que actualmente asociamos la excelencia al perfeccionismo, ¿no? Que asociamos la excelencia al perfeccionismo. Entonces, saber si es lo mismo, ¿no? Porque la pregunta sugiere que el perfeccionismo y una sobreexigencia, pues nos llevan a conductas no sanas, ¿no? Quizá obsesivas, no sé. Entonces, ¿cómo hacer esa diferencia entre cuál es la excelencia, el estado óptimo, y algo que ya raya quizá en la obsesión con el perfeccionismo?
So the optimal state is not a perfectionist state. The perfectionist state is flow. Flow is that one time that you outdid yourself. You're dramatically better than ever. the problem with flow is you can't make it happen. It happens to you. It's like grace, it falls from the sky.
Mm.
However, the optimal state is below flow, but still very effective, highly performing. And perfectionism, very interestingly, does not help. And I'll tell you why. A perfectionist has a mental inner dialogue that is looking at what is wrong and what needs to be improved. They drive themselves, 120%, and only see the problem, never see what's going well. When they become leaders, by the way, perfectionists they only see what people do wrong, not what they do right. They give failing grades, never celebrate strengths or wins. So perfectionism can be understood or analyzed through the self-awareness part of emotional intelligence. Listen, look at what you're telling yourself. Are you only fixating on what I did wrong, what she or he did wrong? That's perfectionism, and it's not helpful at all. You want to understand what your strengths are and also understand that you can always improve. A perfectionist tends to dismiss people as they are rather than understanding I can get better, you can get better. And so I see it as a very unhelpful attitude, both in personal performance and particularly in leadership.
Wow, gracias también por esa respuesta. Tenemos otras preguntas. Esta es de Carolina Cataneo. Nos dice que si existe algo llamado que podríamos denominar como inteligencia espiritual, y si sí existe esta inteligencia espiritual, ¿cuál es la relación con la inteligencia emocional y cómo puede impactarnos para entrar en estos estados óptimos?
I think there probably is a spectrum. Emotional intelligence is at one level, and then if you take self-awareness, spiritual disciplines have always encouraged a high level of self-awareness. Know thyself, the Greeks said. It's a prerequisite for having a sound spiritual life. Be honest with yourself about what you're doing, what you're good at, what you're not. The second part, managing yourself. Every spiritual tradition has some kind of self-discipline. If you become a monk or a nun, you take vows. I won't do this. I won't do that. You try to get your behavior under some level of control. Every spiritual tradition, I believe, encourages empathy and compassion, because I think compassion is the ultimate outcome of real, true, deep empathy. And then putting that all together to be effective in your relationships. Spiritual traditions want to see that. So how does it have to do with optimal performance? Should help, but I actually don't know. I don't have any data. Sorry.
Ok, no, pero muchas gracias también por esa respuesta. Nos preguntan, también nos pide Patricia Correa, que si nos puedes hablar un poco más de la importancia de la empatía y por qué es fundamental en las relaciones laborales.
Empathy, first of all, needs self-management. You, because the social brain is arranged so that emotions are contagious, you don't want to be overwhelmed by someone's upset, for example. So someone who's highly empathic also needs to have good management of their own emotions in order to stay with a person. Think about a physician in the emergency room. People come who are in great pain and suffering and wounded and bleeding. And for that doctor to help them, they can't be overwhelmed by feeling the pain of the person, because they have to be calm and make good decisions about how to intervene. And in the workplace, I think empathy, being a good listener, being able to make people feel not just heard and seen, but understood, is extremely crucial to having strong relationships with them. And strong relationships are what help you as a leader, what help you as a teammate. They're the basis of effectiveness in anything that involves relationship. And it might be being a salesperson, it might be managing, doesn't matter. But you need that strong connection, that strong relationship in order to be effective in your job.
¿Mm? Es verdad, la empatía nos conecta con los demás y abre muchas puertas. Wow. Tengo otra pregunta que eh, me intriga mucho saber hacia dónde se dirigen las investigaciones sobre inteligencia emocional. ¿Hacia dónde va todo esto, las nuevas investigaciones y cómo impactarán los resultados, lo que se descubra en nuestras vidas?
You know, there's so many areas that could be further researched on emotional intelligence, including how it impacts our lives. One of the more interesting areas, I think, is the connection between emotional intelligence and longevity, physical health,
Mm,
good emotional health. I'd like to see a study, for example, that followed people for decades, looking at their emotional intelligence, say in midlife, through the rest of their lives, to see if it predicts whether they'll live longer, or whether they'll have a longer, what's called a health span, a span of years where you remain healthy despite your chronological age. I suspect so, but we don't have that data yet. So I would say there are many areas where we could have further research on the impact of emotional intelligence. As someone who's now in my zone of life, I'm interested in that one particularly.
ok, wow. Sí, hay mucho por descubrir definitivamente. Tenemos una pregunta más de Flor. Y Flor pregunta, ¿cómo reconocer el estado óptimo? ¿Este estado es tanto mental como emocional? Bueno, son dos preguntas. ¿Cómo reconocer el estado óptimo? Y si este estado óptimo es tanto mental como emocional.
Yes. So the optimal state was discovered, I think I said this, but just to make clear, the optimal
Ujú.
state was discovered in research at Harvard, where they had people keep a journal of their own experience of working every day. And analyzing those journals, they came up with the optimal state. For any individual, you can ask yourself a series of questions. Am I performing at my best? Am I enjoying what I'm doing? Am I engaged and focused on what I'm doing, or am I distracted? You know, people, research at Harvard has also found that people are distracted about 50% of the time, and even more at work. So being focused on what you're doing, being engaged, is very important. And then, am I connecting well with the people I work with? These are questions you can answer. And then the question is, what's my health like? Am I having a lot of headaches, backaches, stomach aches? Often those are signs of stress. But if you're in an optimal state, more often you would have less stress-related physical illness.
Ok. Entonces también incluye lo físico, el estado óptimo, incluye todo nuestro ser. Tenemos otra pregunta de Dai
Yes.
García Cueto, de Argentina, y nos dice, ¿por qué la mayoría de los jefes o
Hmm.
líderes no tienen desarrollada la inteligencia emocional? ¿A qué se deberá? Y él lanza ahí algunas especulaciones. ¿Es por el género, la edad o por qué razón? O sea, ¿por qué?
Good question. I'd like to
Ujú,
know. You know, the decision to promote someone is very complex. It's very often emotional intelligence plays no part. It might be on the basis of technical expertise, business expertise. It might be because this person is a good buddy of someone who's higher up, who is in a position to help them advance. There are many, many factors at play in any organization in promoting someone to a high level or managerial position. It might be because they were a very good individual performer Maybe they were a perfectionist driving themselves, but they won't turn out to be a very good boss or manager or executive. I have a friend who was a coach to C-suite people, you know, chief this officer, chief that officer. She says all of them had a very high focus on their goals. That's how they got where they are. But she says if they don't have empathy, they're going to be a terrible leader. So many people get promoted for reasons that have nothing to do with their emotional intelligence. However, they may find, oh, I better develop it. There's a friend of mine from Argentina, actually, Claudio Fernandez Arroz, was head of research at a global headhunter firm, executive search firm. And they did a study of people that they had recommended for high level positions who were later fired. And they found around the world, the reason they were hired was because of intelligence and business expertise. The reason they were fired was some lapse in emotional intelligence. So the Daniel Goleman Emotional Intelligence Program is in Español from Key Step Media. If you can recommend it to your boss, thank you very much.
Perfecto. Pues parece ser que este tema de los jefes no empáticos es muy recurrente porque tenemos otra pregunta muy práctica, que si nos puedes dar de tres, de tres, algunas herramientas, tres herramientas para aprender a manejar nuestras emociones y sacar nuestro yo óptimo en un contexto con jefes no empáticos.
Sure. Okay. So whether the problem is a boss with no empathy or if it's a boss with no empathy, here's one thing that you might try, but be careful. And that is letting your boss know, maybe indirectly, that when your boss does X, which is unempathic, you feel Y, and it has Z impact on your ability to perform. And if your boss would be more empathic, you would do better. Because leadership is the art of getting work done well through other people. Your boss's success actually depends on you, on how well your boss can get you to perform. So you're actually helping your boss. That's one tip. Tip number two, do that attention training exercise where you bring your focus to your breath and then to the next breath, the in breath, the out breath, the gap, the next breath, pay full attention, and then the out breath. And then when your mind wanders and you notice it wandered, bring it back. Because what you're doing is strengthening your ability to focus at work, even though you do this before you go to work or when you get home. It's like going to the gym. You're building your physical fitness, build your mental fitness. And then if you're on the spot and you want to become more calm and clear, I'll tell you something that's used around the world by special forces when they're about to go into a tense situation. It's a breath control exercise where you breathe in very fully, your stomach extends because you're breathing deeply. You hold your breath for as long as is comfortable, then you exhale for as long as is comfortable. Sometimes you do it to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 in, 1, 2, 3, 4 holding, 1, 2, 3, 4 exhaling. And if you do this 6 to 9 times, the research shows it shifts your physiology from that state of being stressed, anxious, upset to the rest and recovery phase where you're more calm and more clear. So there are 3 things.
Pues muchas gracias, son tips muy buenos. Tenemos una última pregunta y con esta ya vamos a cerrar. De Carolina Cataneo, menciona que la maternidad y el trabajo, pues, es un gran desafío, ¿no? Para las trabajadoras que viven esta situación. Y ¿qué aspectos crees que deban evolucionar o qué aspectos pueden desarrollar quienes se encuentran en esta situación en términos de inteligencia emocional para reducir estas tensiones, ¿no? Esta situación tan tensionante?
This is a tough one, and I actually think that the answer ultimately is systemic, not individual. I
Ujú.
think it's getting organizations or governments to recognize that this is important, that the tension between being a mom and having a job is really high and it should be lowered. There should be childcare, for example, that's paid for by governments so that moms can go to work and not be stressed out. That's my feeling. And that the emotional intelligence there is has to do with how well you can convince political decision makers to take this seriously. That's one level. The other level has to do with how you manage your own feelings, your own emotions. If you get very upset about it, overwhelmed about it, you actually won't be able to do either job well. If at work you're worried about the kid, at home you're worried about work, that doesn't help you. So being able to manage your own emotions, I think, is something that we can do as individuals. Remember Viktor Frankl saying, they controlled my external situation. They didn't control my inner world. That's up to me.
Sí, sí, hay que, sí, definitivamente centrarnos más en nuestro mundo interior. Ah, pues muchísimas gracias, Daniel. Hemos llegado al
Mm,
final. No sé si quieras brindarnos unas
my pleasure.
últimas palabras y prácticamente con esto cerraríamos.
I I would encourage everyone to think about their own level of emotional intelligence and remember this set of abilities is learned and learnable, and you can improve it at any point in life if you're motivated.
Ok, pues sí, definitivamente tenemos que introducirnos cada vez más a este mundo de la inteligencia emocional, ¿no? Para beneficiarnos en todos los sentidos. Yo tengo una última petición nada más, que por favor abras un programa de inteligencia emocional también para
Yes.
políticos, para todo tipo de políticos. Por favor, necesitamos políticos con inteligencia emocional en este mundo. Definitivamente.
That's a wonderful wish, but I don't know that they'd be motivated.
Es verdad. Sí.
Thank you so much, Miguel.
Muchas gracias a todos por su presencia y les damos las gracias y hasta luego. Nos despedimos.
Adios.
Adiós.